They told you to apologize, to own your mistakes, to be vulnerable, honest, accountable, because taking responsibility makes you stronger. But that's a lie. In the world Machiavelli lived in, and the world you live in now, apology doesn't make you strong. It makes you exposed. It invites attack. It confirms guilt. It gives others a target, a weapon, and a false sense of moral superiority. And Machiavelli knew if you must appear humble, it is only to deceive, never to admit defeat, because the truth is brutal. You should never apologize unless you're lying. We're not talking about accidental bumps on the sidewalk or missed calls. We're talking about the apologies that shake your identity. The kind where you bend your spine in front of someone because you were told it's the mature thing to do. But what really happens when you apologize? People don't always forgive. They remember. You showed your neck. They took note. I messed up. I'm sorry. I was wrong. You were right. You now have the moral high ground. You thought it was resolution. They took it as leverage because now they can say even he admitted he was wrong. She apologized for that. She knows she's not trustworthy. And that's how it begins. The slow erosion of power through well-intentioned self-humiliation. The very structure of an apology is a power exchange. You are the inferior. They are the judge. You are seeking approval. They are granting it. You are asking to be accepted. They are deciding if you're worthy. It doesn't matter if they say it's okay. The hierarchy is now set. You are the beneath them. And in a Machiavellian system, hierarchy determines everything. Respect, fear, leverage, control. You can't lead people who've seen you. Apologize too many times. You can't influence those who have collected your guilt like currency. And Machiavelli would say, a man who humbles himself without advantage invites contempt, not loyalty. Let's address the obvious. What if you really did mess up? What if you were at fault? Shouldn't you own it? Yes, but not through apology. Through correction. If you want to fix it quietly, completely without ceremony. Don't broadcast guilt. Don't ask for understanding. Don't beg for forgiveness. Machiavelli's doctrine is this: do what must be done. Say what must be said, but never lower your stature in the process. Here's the key. Responsibility is not equal to apology. You can take full responsibility without ever giving away the power position. Apologizing is like stepping off a throne, handing them the crown and saying, "Here, judge me as you wish." Machiavelli would never. He'd assess the damage, correct the course, make strategic amends if it served his interest, but he'd never confess in a way that made him vulnerable. The most dominant figures in politics, business, media, they rarely apologize. When they do, it's late, vague, and wrapped in ambiguity. If anyone was offended, things could have been clearer. We regret how this was perceived. Why? Because they're not saying sorry. They're protecting position. They understand that apologies in public, perception do not repair trust. They invite further scrutiny, reputation, decay, and the loss of frame. That's the Machiavellian lens. Real apologies cost you reputation. Strategic apologies earn you time, sympathy, or access. Machiavelli would only apologize to disarm an enemy temporarily. Trick someone into believing they held moral authority. Gain access to a space, deal, or alliance he couldn't enter through force. In all cases, the apology would be a tool, not a truth. He who seeks to be good in all acts is sure to come to ruin among so many who are not good. Never apologize unless you are manipulating, and if you are, make it believable, make it soft, make it work for you, but never ever let it be sincere, because sincere apology means you still believe you're equal to the person you're bowing to. And in Machiavellian power games, no one is ever equal. Machiavelli wouldn't apologize. He'd disappear into silence because in the political arena, the court, the battlefield, or today's internet, silence is safer than confession and more dangerous than denial. Let someone else name the mistake. Let them speculate. Let them spin themselves into doubt. But you stay silent, because why? The moment you refuse to clarify, you hand them something far more powerful than a sorry doubt. When you don't apologize, here's what happens. Some will attack harder to provoke a confession. Some will second-guess their judgment, wondering if they misunderstood you. Some will expose their emotional instability, needing you to say something just so they feel okay again. That's how silence works. It becomes a mirror. It reflects them, not you. And that's Machiavellian mastery. Control the battlefield by refusing to step on it. It is not titles that honor men, but men who honor titles. So too, it is not the apology that restores reputation. It is who remains composed when under pressure to break. You apologize. They gain closure. You stay silent. They stay obsessed. Most people who explain, clarify, overspeak, beg not to be misunderstood. But power is preserved. In unreadability, Machiavelli understood that fear, curiosity, and suspicion last far longer than understanding. So, what does he do? He lets you wonder. Did he do it? Why won't he just say something? Does he not care at all? And that wondering, it's emotional leverage, because people can't move on from what they can't explain. They revisit it, replay it, reanalyze it. You don't lose control, you multiply it. Imagine this. Someone calls you out, demands an apology, puts you on the spot. Most people collapse. They try to defend the right thing. They say, "I'm sorry, that wasn't my intention." But Machiavelli would never fight on someone else's terms. He wouldn't defend intention, he'd redirect attention. He'd say, "I hear that's how it came across. That wasn't the experience I had." There are always many sides to a story. He never admits guilt. He introduces gaiety, complexity, and complexity makes apology unnecessary. The promise given was a necessity of the past. The word broken is a necessity of the present. In modern terms, the moment someone demands your apology, you are already being positioned beneath them. Refuse the positioning, not by fighting, but by fogging the glass. Machiavelli understood the counterintuitive art of emotional absorption. If someone accuses you, you don't deny, you don't react, you don't get defensive. You look at them, let them speak, let them unload everything they feel, and then you offer no justification. You just say, "That's a lot to think about. Thanks for being honest." Noted. You've given them the illusion of release but no confirmation. And because you didn't confess, they can't pin you down. You've neutralized their control by giving no resistance and no confession. Your water, your fog, your silence that refuses to validate. The weapon. Machiavelli would never feel guilt as a moral truth. He'd use it strategically like a disguise. If he needed to look remorseful, he would. Not because he was, because it worked. If he need to seem regretful, he'd choose the moment, the tone, the audience. But behind the mask, he's still calculating. Because real guilt weakens, but performed guilt manipulates. In the modern world, guilt is currency. People will try to extract it from you, to trade it for your silence, your compliance, your submission. And when you apologize, you've paid the tax. You've signed the contract. You've entered their emotional key, economy, on their terms. But when you stay silent, you force them to carry the discomfort themselves. And that's psychological warfare. You know now why. Real apologies bleed your power. But what about fake ones? What about apologies that aren't about truth, but advantage? This is the only kind of apology Machiavelli endorsed. Not from remorse, not from accountability, but from strategy. The ends justify the means. And if the end requires an apology, lie, perform, win. It's about lowering defenses. Let's break down how Machiavelli would do it. He apologizes. Humble, sincere, perfectly timed. They relax. They drop the sword. They stop the chase. He recalibrates. He gains access, influence, sympathy. He moves again when they're no longer watching. The apology wasn't a gesture of peace. It was a Trojan horse. In a moment of conflict, tension, or failure, sometimes, the only path forward is to pretend you're the one falling back. A calculated apology makes you look harmless. It reframes you from opponent to misunderstood ally. This is how Machiavelli would handle powerful enemies. He'd admit to overstepping. He'd confess that his words may have sounded too direct. He'd regret any confusion caused. Sounds soft, feels safe. But behind it, no change, no regret, no surrender, just forward movement under the cloak of humility. One must be a fox to recognize traps and a lion to frighten wolves. Sometimes the fox says, "I'm sorry, I frightened you." While already circling your weak side, watch the best manipulators today. They know when to take accountability, but pay attention. They say sorry right before launching a comeback. They apologize just enough to reset the public tone. They express regret in a way that refocuses attention on them, not their offense. Machiavelli would do the same. He wouldn't fight every accusation. He'd take one knee, then rise higher when the crowd softened. Here's one of the most dangerous manipulations. "I know I hurt thee. You and I truly hate myself for it." What seems like a vulnerable apology is actually a bait for emotional reattachment. You're not seeking forgiveness. You're forcing the other person to feel guilty for your guilt. They forget their pain because now they are too busy soothing you. Machiavellian move. It rebalances the emotional dynamic in your favor. And now they hesitate to push back, to question, to leave. You've apologized, but you've also flipped the frame. Now you're the victim, and they're the aggressor for not forgiving you. In rare cases, Machiavelli would make the apology public, a calculated spectacle, the perfect phrasing, the perfect timing, the perfect lesson learned. But once the crowd clapped and moved on, he'd keep the lesson and discard the guilt. He wouldn't shrink. He'd grow. Because the apology wasn't the end, it was the setup. Let's be clear, this kind of apology requires precision. If done too sincerely, you lose power. If done too cynically, you lose trust. But if done surgically with the right tone, the right motive, the right aftermath, you don't just keep control, you gain more than you had before. In today's world, apologies are no longer about integrity. They're about compliance. Society doesn't want your growth. It wants your submission, not your transformation bow, your public display of weakness. And that's exactly why Machiavelli would destroy the modern apology trap. Because he knew men are quick to forget benefits, slow to forget injuries. And when you apologize, you carve the injury into memory. You brand yourself guilty. Even if you weren't, it's about the narrative. Once you're expected to apologize, you've already lost the frame. Because now it's not about what you did, it's about how someone felt. You say, "That wasn't my intention." They say, "Intentions don't matter." You say, "Let me explain." They say, "Don't make excuses." You say, "I'm sorry if you misunderstood." They say, "That's not a real apology." See the trap? You're not apologizing to be forgiven. You're apologizing into a bottomless pit. And the more you feed it, the more they demand. Here's the brutal psychology. When you apologize under pressure, you don't resolve the situation. You open a tab. Now they expect repeated emotional availability, endless proof that you've changed, a tool, long-term performance of guilt to satisfy their perception. And the moment you stop, they say, "So you didn't really mean it." You're back to your old self. "I knew the apology was fake." There's no exit because you're not in forgiveness. You're in servitude. Machiavelli would never stay in that position. He would identify this frame instantly and then detonate it. So what would he do? Simple. He'd reverse the pressure without ever fighting it head-on. Here's how. 1. Mirror their complaint without owning it. Instead of saying, "I'm sorry I hurt you," he'd say, "It wasn't my intention to make you feel that way, and I see how it affected you." Result, they feel heard, but you haven't confessed. No admission is schools, no leverage. 2. Acknowledge emotion, not responsibility. "I can tell this was painful for you. That matters. To me. No guilt, no frame acceptance, just emotional gravity." Now they're dealing with someone in control, not someone submitting. 3. Introduce complexity. There's more to the cause situation than either of us can fully explain in one moment. That phrase ends argument, because now you've reframed the conflict as something bigger than blame. Now you're not a villain. You're a philosopher in the fog. And philosophers don't apologize. They ponder. Machiavelli's genius was never about aggression. It was about frame control. And the most dangerous frame in today's world is moral superiority. If they hold that over you, they can make you crawl. But if you can fracture their certainty, make them question their narrative, force them to reflect, not accuse, then you're not in the courtroom. You're back on the throne. Machiavelli never used apologies as resolutions. He used them as resets, not to rebuild trust, but to rebuild position. Because in power dynamics, the real goal is never forgiveness. It's leverage. And sometimes the fastest way to get it back is to give them a little something that looks like surrender. Here's how Machiavelli would fake repentance. He'd appear regretful, but not emotional. He'd admit something, vague, but not damning. He'd apologize for perception, not for the act. "I never meant to cause confusion. That wasn't my intention. If how I acted gave a wrong impression, I'll own that." Looking back, I see how that might have been received differently. These aren't apologies. They're optical resets. They soften the opponent's grip without ever dropping your own weapon. Machiavelli would let them believe they'd won, because people are most vulnerable when they think they've already conquered you. The fake apology creates calm. Calm invites assumption. Assumption invites sloppiness. And in that moment, you move. Humans are wired to accept closure, especially if it comes wrapped in humility. Even your enemies, if you say the right kind of sorry, will relax. But because they no longer see you as a threat, that's the advantage. When you're no longer feared, you can infiltrate deeper. You can reposition. You can erase suspicion. Here's the Machiavellian equation. 1 will D, delivered fake apology, equals access to rooms you would have been locked out of. And once inside, you don't need to say sorry again because now you've reset the room's memory. Here's where it gets darker. Sometimes a fake apology earns, at me, more loyalty than no apology at all. Here's how. You apologize. They soften. They admire your growth. They let you back in. Now you flip the power dynamic without them noticing because they've chosen to see you as reformed. And the moment they commit to that image of you, they feel emotionally invested in protecting it. I know he used to be cold, but he's changed. They start defending your new persona, and the more they defend it, the more they obey it. Now their loyalty is rooted not in fear, but in the belief that they helped you evolve. And nothing makes people more obedient than the idea that they saved you. Here's Machiavelli's ultimate reversal. You say, I did wrong, I hurt you. But then you add, and I never expected you to forgive me. Now what happens? They feel pressured to do the noble thing, to rise above, to show mercy. You've cornered them emotionally because if they don't accept your apology, they look cruel. And if they do, they've stepped into your psychological arena. Now you've reversed the power. They are on the defense. You are the one who looks strong through humility, and that humility was never real. It was a calculated exchange, guilt for dominance. This is the apology not as surrender, but as psychological architecture. You don't say sorry to lose, you say sorry to unlock something. They were guarding, and once they open the gate, you're already inside. There's a reason Machiavelli would never apologize in public. Because when you apologize in front of others, you're not just asking for forgiveness. You're giving up authority. To apologize publicly is to say, I accept your judgment. I allow you to define me. I give you the final word. And that is irreversible. Here's what happens. Every time someone apologizes publicly, they kneel. The mob decides the terms. The apology becomes permanent record. Any comeback becomes conditional. Now, no matter what you do, you'll always be the one who once said, I was wrong, and they were right. Even if they forgive you, you're stained. Even if you rebuild, you're building on their terms. It is better to be feared than loved if one cannot be both. In a public apology, you lose both. You're no longer feared because you surrendered. You're no longer loved because they already punished you. What's left? Pity. And that is the final death of power. Modern culture has weaponized the phrase, he owned it. She took accountability. They made a sincere public apology. Sounds virtuous, right? But look closer. Where are they now? Cancelled, forgotten, replaced. Because owning it doesn't fix anything. It simply makes the mob feel morally superior right before they erase you. Machiavelli would never own it. He'd reposition it, reframe it, redirect it, but never submit to the crowd's narrative. If an apology must happen, it must be offstage in a private room, without an audience to clap or record it. Why? Because privacy preserves control. There's no replay, No soundbite, no digital. Memory, no viral shame. You said what you had to. They heard it. It ended. And now you move forward without an official scar. Machiavelli would give the minimum, necessary remorse to buy peace, then vash before it could be used against him. Let's say you apologize on camera, or on social media, or in front of a crowd. Here's what happens. You go viral, not for your success, but for your failure. The apology becomes your identity. You're referenced only in relation to that incident. People don't say he rebuilt everything after that. They say, isn't that the guy who apologized for insert moment of weakness? Now you're branded. Even if you win again, you win as a former loser. Even if you rise with shame on your back. And in a world of perception, that shame weighs more than truth. Machiavelli understood that reputation is not about what's real. It's about what's remembered. So if you're going to make a comeback, don't start with an apology. Start with action. Fix the system. Remove the threat. Build something new. And once you've proven power, then if you absolutely must, leak a whisper of remorse. Never a headline, never a press release, just enough to appear humans free without appearing broken. Machiavelli's greatest advantage wasn't in strength. It was in framing. He understood that truth doesn't control people. Perception does. And nothing warps perception more than guilt, especially when it's redirected. The trick isn't to deny guilt. It's to transfer it, not by blaming others, but by leading them to believe the guilt belongs to them. You don't say, it wasn't my fault. You say, I understand why you'd see it that way, and I wish I'd been in a place where I could have handled it differently. Sounds accountable, right? But what does it really do? It implies you were wounded. It suggests they expected too much. It flips the lens without raising your voice. Now they feel unsure. Now they question if they were too harsh. They entered the conversation to judge you. Now they're defending themselves. And you haven't said sorry once. Once you own guilt, you inherit punishment. But once you reflect it, you create hesitation. Machiavelli would let his enemies accuse. He'd let them bring their evidence. Then, without denying it, he'd show why their judgment exposes their lack of understanding. You're angry. I get that you expected better. From me. I see that. But ask yourself, where was I when I needed support? Now, the judge is squirming, not because you're right, but because they no longer feel morally clean. That's how guilt becomes a circle, and you step outside it. In modern power games, people don't need to prove you're guilty. They only need to frame you as either the villain, the victim, or the fool. Machiavelli refused all three. He lived in gray, space where people couldn't define him, so they couldn't corner him. Here's how you hold that space. You don't justify. You don't defend. You speak in layers. You say things like, there's a part of the story I haven't told. It's not about right or wrong. It's about what worked. There's a version of this that would make me look like the villain, but that's not the full truth. This creates mental fog. Now, no one can say for sure if you were wrong, and if they can't be, sure, they don't feel safe attacking you. Machiavelli believed that fear, respect, and uncertainty should live together in the same room. You don't want to be predictable. You want to be a paradoxente, because people don't destroy paradoxes. They study them, and what people study, they don't control. Here's a Machiavellian principle few dare use. When accused, say nothing. When misunderstood, say less. When attacked, respond slowly and without heat. Why? Because the unexplained man is unkillable. As long as they can't define you, they can't dismantle you. Let them beg for explanation. Let them scream for answers. All you give is presence, not permission. And in that silence, they fall apart. Not because you said something wrong, but because you refuse to say anything at all. The apology is what weak men offer when they want back. Machiavelli didn't believe in winning people back. He believed in making them forget you ever lost. You don't rise by saying, "I've changed." You rise by changing nothing except their memory of who you are. And that requires silence, action, and the art of disappearing guilt. Machiavelli would never correct the narrative. He'd become someone else so quietly that the narrative becomes outdated. He wouldn't say, "That's not us, who I am," anymore. He'd show up with a new strategy, a new demeanor, a new numb level of control, and everyone watching would realize you can't keep punishing someone who's outgrown the crime. That's the power of evolution over explanation. No apologies, no rebranding, just consistent new behavior that makes the old you irrelevant. The narrative doesn't change when you beg. It changes when people feel behind for still holding on to it. If you've lost status, power, reputation, don't crawl back. Machiavelli would return without announcement. "No, I'm back. No. Sorry for the absence. No, thank you for waiting." He would resume activity like nothing ever happened. He'd give them two choices: pretend it never happened, or admit they've forgiven him by engaging again. And most people, too, protect their own image, will choose the first. They'll silence their memory just to keep up with your current version. That's how you win. By never admitting you lost. The fastest way to erase guilt, win in public, silently, right, unapologetically. People don't argue with success. They revise history around it. You achieve something undeniable, and suddenly it wasn't that bad. He probably had his reasons. That's just part of his journey. Now, the same people who questioned you become the ones rewriting your legend, but only if you rise without needing their validation. Because if you ask for it, you're still under their control. Machiavelli would never let history remember him as guilty. He'd make sure the final impression was the one that erased the need for apology. You don't win by getting forgiveness. You win by becoming too powerful to criticize. And that doesn't happen by explaining yourself. It happens by showing up unshaken, replacing doubt with dominance, and letting results speak the language. Apology never could. Never apologize, aren't see? Unless you're lying.